Perfect. Looks like we got some peeps joining in.
Some good people in here already coming in. A bunch of folks I know.
Did you pay them to join, Wes?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially Dr. Nelson. That man, he's probably doing smarter things at the same time.
Is that who I met?
Keith Nelson, I don't know.
Who did? I met one of your professor guys when I was in
Oh,
Kentucky.
yeah, that was Dr. Ramage. Yeah,
Okay.
great guy. Yeah, so Keith is over at in California. He's over in the all the rocket world. He's I like to call him my favorite rocket scientist. He might not like that, but
Gotcha. When I worked at a place before, our investors was a guy that had literally a rocket science degree, and then our other investors were neurosurgeons. So you know the old joke, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, it doesn't take a neurosurgeon. Our joke was, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a neurosurgeon, but if it does, we have one of each.
if it does.
If it does.
That's awesome.
I see I used to call him Big Nate Metterer in the chat here.
Oh, yes.
But he's dropped so many LBs, he's like less big Nate.
Chiseled.
Yes.
That's awesome. Hopefully we can enable chat so we can hear from you fine folks. Danielle, I don't know if that's a possibility.
I see some people posting in the Q&A, said hello from Texas. Hashtag
Right
the
on.
Powell. Wow.
Yeah.
The
Thank
Powell.
you got the brand correct. Thanks, Nate.
Well, we will, just for everyone, we will get started here in a minute. We're letting everyone else trickle in, and we'll get started here in just a second. And we'll work on getting chat enabled too, so we can hear from all of you guys that way as well. David, what's been going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, you know, my beloved Alabama Crimson Tide has lost 2 games this year.
Hard to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I checked the roof of my house isn't high enough to jump off of. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah, no, things are good here. It is officially fall in Alabama, which is outstanding. I love fall when it's crisp in the mornings. I know you're in Tampa, so you don't get
Never
that
heard of
season.
fall. I don't know what that is. Yeah.
What is it? What is fall? Do the palm trees change their leaves?
Not really. Yeah, not really. They just drop their like seed pods everywhere, and it's so aggravating. So I will tell you though, now the hurricane is kind of cleaned up, I can finally get in my backyard. My backyard kind of butts into a lake and then a conservation lot area, so it'll flood in. And I kid you not, where we throw the football with the kids, there's fish like this big swimming in my backyard up until a few days ago. So it's been nice to have my backyard
drained out.
Finally. Yeah, it was great. I've never seen so much rain. No, we were good. Yeah, we were good. Lost a fence, but no home damage of any kind. So, yeah, you count your blessings for sure.
That's good. That's good.
Well, why don't we just go ahead and jump in? Danielle, you want to kick us off with anything, or you want me just to jump in?
For jumping in, guys. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for putting in the chat where you guys are from, for carving out some time to hear from two of the best. We have David Powell and Wes Spencer, and I'll kind of let them introduce themselves, and we look forward to hearing what they are going to share with us. So I'll pass along to you, Wes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Danielle. You're awesome. So yeah, Wes Spencer here. Great to be with you. Vice President of Security Strategy at CyberFOX. And most of you, I probably know many of you for a while. I love just sharing and helping in the cybersecurity journey. We know as an MSP, it's hard. It's not easy. We know if you're coming in, you're not an MSP, same thing. It's only getting harder. And so what we're gonna do is kind of connect the dots today and some awesome stuff around cybersecurity compliance, privilege management. And I could think of no one better than my good friend, David Powell, to join. David, what's up? You want to say who you are? If people don't know you.
What's up, Wes? So for those of you who don't know, David Powell, live in Birmingham, Alabama, lived here my whole life. I'm the VP of Sales Strategy at Pax8, which means absolutely zero. That's just what they had the open head count when they brought me in. And my job here has been to help our MSP partners with their go-to-market of how to sell cybersecurity out to their end users. And Wes and I worked together back in the day at Perch, which that was a quick run, but it was a good run, and I enjoyed working with Wes. So anytime I get the chance to jump on with him, I'm happy to do it. And let's be real, Danielle is awesome to be around too. So when they ask you to help out, you're always, well, happy to do that. And we appreciate the partnership that CyberFOX has with Pax8.
Love it, love it, love it. So, David, I can't think of a better way to get started than this fine video right here. Carry us on.
Don't you love it? So, okay, this is a 1959 Chevy Bel Air crashing into a 2009 Chevy Malibu. And when I show this sometimes in front of people, I'm always like, all right, I'm going to show these two cars crashing into each other. Which one wins? And the answer is they always go with the Land Yacht, which is the wrong answer, right? And they always pick the Bel Air because they think, oh, it's huge, it's massive, it has all this steel and stuff around it, and it's not made of plastic. But if you look in this next shot, Wes, it's going to come from behind and show the inside of the car, and that crash test dummy would no longer be with us, right? And so it's this explosion of glass and all this kind of stuff, but you know, that car doesn't survive. The passenger wouldn't survive because it had no safety systems built into it. So like I always like to talk about this is if you go to the next, I have some data there where this is the number of motor vehicle deaths in the United States per billion miles traveled, going all the way back to 1950. And there's a couple of noted points on here. One is that it's come down a ton. Number two is where has it not gone? Has not gone to zero, right? Is that we've reached this equilibrium to where there's an acceptable amount of risk in exchange for convenience. And basically, you know, if we were going 35 miles an hour, no one dies in 35-mile-an-hour crashes, right? But you know, we don't want to drive 35. We want to get there quicker, and we have like places we need to be and time frames we need to be there in them. So we found this equilibrium here. Similarly, I'm about to pivot this to cybersecurity. You can't do all the things, right? Is that you can't have all the things because your users would never be able to do anything. So we have to kind of find this equilibrium, you know, around that. Then the next slide, Wes, I always talk about this idea of like a couple of years ago, I don't like driving other people's car to the beach. I mean, I like driving other people's car to the beach. I don't like to drive my own because I like sand in other people's car, not in mine. And so I go and I run a lot from Avis. I go to Avis to pick up, I was supposed to have like a Tahoe. I go in there to get it. And they're like, well, Mr. Powell, we don't have a Tahoe. We had this really nice Mercedes GLS 460. And I'm like, well, heck yeah, I'll take that. And I get in it. I mean, it's got safety systems out the wazoo. The seat vibrates if you're getting out of the lane. It's got the collision avoidance and lane keeping assist and like all this stuff. Quite frankly, too many things. I pulled off and tried to turn all that crap off because it was too much stuff. But you know what every car has, Wes? And this is the title of our topic today. Next slide is the seatbelts and airbags, right? Is that when you go buy a car, it comes with seatbelts and airbags. You can't buy it without them. They're non-optional. You can't turn them off or turn them on. They come turned on in the cars and all this kind of stuff. And so it's just this very thing that we have grown accustomed to of wherever you go. Oh, dude, an 8-track. Real quick, Keith, my dad had the adapter that you put an 8-track in and then put a cassette in the 8-track adapter in a Cutlass. Anyway, but yeah, the 8-track. Oh, I had one of those too. Yeah, when you put the cassette tape in the thing, and then I think we probably grew up in the generation where you had the tape
Yeah,
with the
that's what I
wire
had.
coming out, plugged into a Sony Walkman, a Discman, and when you went over bumps, it would skip, and so it would just make you like insane. So every car has seatbelts and airbags, and so we have to kind of think of like there's this minimum level of safety that we're all okay with. And then as we're going to talk more about this later, Wes, on the next slide, I'll talk about these actuarial tables and how, you know, actuaries are this group in insurance companies that basically analyze all the data and figure out what the likelihood of certain outcomes are based on the billion points of data that they have. And they are fantastic with, you know, help. Like if you call up and say, hey, I'm a 51-year-old male with this kind of like family medical history, they would say, well, David, you're probably going to die at 77 years and 6 months. And they're astonishingly accurate with that. They're also really good with cars. So this next slide, if you drive this car, you probably drive like an idiot, which Wes does not have that car. If you'd have the next car in here, you probably drive like a meemaw, you know, a nice Southern meemaw dropping off meals to the old people, you know, in your neighborhood in one of these grocery getters right here. So the data on that is like fantastic. It is great. They know precisely accident rate per mile for all these different kind of cars. But then in cybersecurity insurance, West, they send you a questionnaire, which is like the dumbest thing ever, right? Is like now you've got this like moment in time, which really doesn't like help you or mean anything at all. It's because you've got this silly little moment in time, this questionnaire, and you could be so meticulous filling that thing out. And then what the very next day it changes. It's not a static environment. So that would be like on the next slide, me coming up to Wes as an insurance agent saying, all right, Wes, drive around the parking lot. And I watch Wes, if you click that's actually a little video there, Wes. Yeah, so I watch Wes drive. Wes is 10 and 2, using his blinker, parking perfectly. And I'm like, oh, Wes is such a low risk driver. I'm going to give him very favorable rates. But what I don't know is that Wes drives like he stole it the rest of the time. And then I come back next year and I'm like, Wes, drive around the parking lot. And he's 10 and 2 and using his blinker. And so what you've got is this massive disconnect, right? Where we have the rest of our life, there's minimum amounts of safety that we're willing to deploy and employ, seatbelts and airbags. The data is fantastic on what the risk of all these different circumstances are. And then you get to cybersecurity and we've got no data, crappy measurements of risk, and an uncertainty around what the crap am I supposed to do about this? What are the seatbelts and airbags that we should have from a cybersecurity standpoint? I know, Wes, you live in this insurance space. I've adjacent to a lot of this insurance space. And so where we're going to go with this today is, what does cybersecurity insurance think are the seatbelts and airbags? Like, what's the minimum standard as an MSP that all of your customers can have? And I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this message to a lot of our partners here at Pax8. They love it, right? It's because if you go in and talk to your end user around EDR, MFA, and advanced threat protection, the business owner over there, their eyes just glaze over. They don't even know what you're talking about. But they get the idea that they would not even go down the corner to Starbucks without putting their seatbelt on, and they would not send their kids out in a car that doesn't have airbags. So that's this disconnect that we have. Is the way that we practice in our real lives is a massive disconnect to how we do things with cybersecurity.
David, one thing I want to ask before we move on, it's intriguing to me that you talk about it from the minimum rather than the maximum. Because so often, as you and I are both been in the security world for quite some time, so often we security folks, we want to jump to the maximum. What's the maximum? You got to have all these things. And I think when you talk about it, even from the minimum, that definitely gets a decision maker thinking, whoa, do they really have my best interest in mind here? They're actually thinking about it from what's practical and reasonable, and are passing a reasonableness standard. Is that kind of what you're angling at too?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things. One is, who is your competition? Your competition usually is inaction, right? The customer's not doing anything. You're wanting them to do something. You don't need them to do all the things. Maybe they want to, but initially you want them to do something. I always kind of talk about this idea around this, if you're trying to save for your kid's college, but if you went and met with, I think Wes has like 100 kids or something like that. I can't remember.
101,
it's like
close,
4
yeah.
or 5. Like somebody I was talking to the other day, they said when you have a bunch of kids, I think this guy had 8. He said it's not a matter that you might lose one. It's like when you get in the car and suddenly there's an extra, and you're like, where did we pick up this extra kid? But if you went to meet with your financial advisor and they're like, oh, Wes, you can never eat out again. You can only eat ramen noodles. You got to save $1 billion a year to send your kid to college. That won't even be enough. You'd be like, well, forget that. I guess I'm getting student loans. Versus, hey, Wes, can we start saving $50 a week? And get them on a gradual plan. And I think just getting them to move, and that's where that kind of minimum, piece comes in, is like, okay, I just need you to do something. That's better than nothing. And then the other piece on this I like to focus on, sticking with the analogy of seatbelts and airbags, is what do seatbelts and airbags don't do? They don't prevent accidents, right? They just make the outcome better when you do have this inevitable accident. And I think we get hung up in cybersecurity lots of times trying to say like, oh, this keep you from being breached, or the customer is like, if I buy these tools, I'll never have an incident. And none of those things are true, right? Is like, what you're trying to get is improved outcomes when the bad thing does happen, because we've all found in this assumed breach world, we can't keep the bad thing from happening.
I love that. So to even just paint out the auto analogy with insurance into cyber, it's the same thing, right? At some point, an auto carrier, insurance carrier says, okay, cool, I can take this risk now because I've got the data science to prove that you've put yourself in this position with this type of car, with this, again, like you mentioned, gender, age, how many miles you drive, all of these things put together. Now we're in a category where we can shoulder that risk. And what my friends at Fifth Wall say, Reed kind of said this one time, the president over there, and I've always laughed. He's like, really, when you boil down insurance, it's legalized gambling. That's what it is, right? And so
Yeah.
they're willing to take the gamble when they know the risk favors them. And I think you painted it well. Cyber is in the exact same thing. We should always be in the habit, to your point, of saying there's no 100% security. There's no guarantee, but there's also a minimum level of good, what I would call like a cybersecurity poverty line that we
Yes.
have got to hit. And if we don't
Yeah.
hit that, then we're never going to be in a defensible position in which we can have the cover for cyber insurance when things happen. And David, just talk to me a little bit about, in the aftermath of a breach, these things get far more expensive than a client ever thinks about, right? Because they're looking at it from the perspective of like, what would this cost me? 50,000 if we get hit? Why should I go spend thousands of dollars a month for a $50,000, damage that I can just pay the ransom for 50K and be off on my way?
Yeah. Well, when you look at the cyber defense matrix, you've got the boom, the bad event, and then it gets people heavy, on the other side of boom. And I always like to kind of joke is that the Marines motto is never leave a man behind. And Accenture's motto is never leave, right? As they just keep looking for more and more projects. And when you get incident response in the mix, that's what you're talking about a lot of times. It's just this billable time, billable time, billable time, billable time. And so you're much better off, burning some cycles on trying to make that outcome less negative, and having these kind of minimum standards. Because look, you're going to pay now or pay later. And the paying later is much more expensive than whatever you might be paying now. And so I think it's just that idea of like, do something, improve your outcomes, and make it less likely that you're going to be, having a bunch of expensive people sit in your conference room all on the clock.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really well said. So let's dive into this a little bit more then as we kind of finish painting this story out. I'm going to get past here. At the end of the day, how many of you feel like, and maybe the reason you joined this is because you're like, I'm definitely interested in what's happening in the carrier world. And I see the question that came in. We will answer it on, is privilege management even like, is that becoming a requirement? I see that question. And I know you're concerned about this, right? But at the same time, you're juggling this, all of these requirements are just too much. And how many of you feel like you got hit by the great bait and switch? Like you got into this MSP space because you could fix a printer in 1996, right? And you were happy fixing that printer and you were good at it. And if you had to install a Windows desktop, you could do that well too. But at the end of the day, now you're sitting here in 2024 and you have all kinds of regulation, you have all kinds of compliance mandates. Now you have cyber insurance and you feel like I'm dealing with clients that largely just don't even care. Why is it that I am far more worried than they are about all the things I know they have to meet to be eligible? And I got a great story, a great example of this, David. I was talking to an MSP the other day that said, I had a client, I've had them since the beginning, one of our larger clients. They never wanted to budge on anything, never wanted to pay for anything, never wanted anything. And their number one revenue stream came from one large supplier. They're a very large manufacturer and they had a big upside that it all came down. And so every year they had to apply. They had to say why they're the best. They had to put out a bid process. Every year they put it out. Every year they got the bid. They're good to go. It was a huge portion. I think like 70% of their business. I mean,
Ooh.
absolute huge concentration risk. And then all of a sudden, one day, the MSP gets a phone call from the guy in a panic. And he's like, they turned down my bid. And the guy's like, why? He goes, I was shocked. And I called them up and they said, well, you didn't meet our cybersecurity minimums. And the client said, what are you talking about? I've never changed anything. And you've
That's the
always had those
problem.
minimums. I've never met them. And they said, well, this is the year we decided enough was enough. And so he goes, guess who now cares about security? And so he said, he asked me, he said, what'd you do? And the client said, I was able to get a 2-week window by which I can fix some things and then resubmit. So I don't care what the cost is. I don't care what the budget is. Go, 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 go. Let's make this happen. And it's an interesting story because fortunately the MSP was able to come in and save the day. But it wasn't cheap to the client initially. And then all of a sudden, in a snap of a finger, it became the most valuable, cheapest thing they could ever go purchase because they had no other option than to go meet that standard minimum. Isn't that interesting, David?
Yeah, well, it is. And, I think what's funny too, Wes, is that once, it usually takes a reason for people to want to do something about this. And so the analogy I use all the time is that if you and I went over to Tampa General out there on the island and went up to the cardio intensive care unit and talked to people who were in there because they've had massive heart attacks and interviewed them and said, hey, if you could make lifestyle changes to avoid being here, would you have? And every single one of us would say like, well, heck yeah. No one's be like, you know what, that heart attack wasn't that bad to begin. I'd do that again. Same thing with cyber events. Once somebody's had an incident, nobody wants to go through that again. And so you can either wait for that to happen, or you could take the advice of your physician that's like, hey, these are non-sustainable choices. You're going to end up in this spot. But to your point in that example there is, they were just kind of rolling the dice, and then finally it mattered to them because it mattered to someone else enough for it to matter, to them. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, wait on the external forces to do the right thing or the necessary thing instead of kind of doing it because it's, good and prudent.
That's right. That's right. Exactly it. So as we kind of look, just to sum up what David was talking about, I love the seatbelts and airbags. David, you're the first I've ever heard talk about it. And it's such a great way to look at it. And this is an example. It comes from Visual. I don't know if anyone follows Visual Capitalists, but they're really great. And they actually
good.
tracked exactly what you were talking about, DP, of just showing, look, at the end of the day, we may not want to do these certain things, but we've shown, the data has shown that it absolutely works, right?
Hey,
And so,
Wes, can I have
yeah,
a quick tangent on that last slide?
yeah, please.
Because if people, it seems like a lot of people know us, and they know I can't not take a tangent if there is a tangent to take. So backup cameras, there's this whole school of thought, and there's this whole long article. If y'all want to go Google it, it's a long form article. I think it's from the Atlantic about an Air France flight that crashed over the Atlantic, and everyone on it died. And the plane actually went into the ocean backwards at full power. And I think the title of the article is "Should the Planes Fly Themselves?" But it's this idea of like, do safety systems actually make us worse at things? Because we rely, in fact, instead of a safety system being good, safety systems just allow you to suck more at the thing that they're trying to keep you from doing. So like my daughter is a college student. Most of her friends can't freaking back up because they have backup cameras. My daughter has a 2009 Volvo that does not have a backup camera. She can back up like a champ because she doesn't have this like crutch. And so I do think there's this part of this, though, that like humans matter, is you can't just buy all the tools and expect the tools to save you. That if you look at most root cause analysis of cybersecurity incident, it's a human got socially engineered, clicked something they shouldn't, or something like that in the background. And yes,
Yeah.
so Andy in the chat, just for the record, is typically I order the girliest drink on the menu. And it's just become a thing now. I'll lean into it. And I would say that when I was with Andy in Toronto recently, we got this pink strawberry drink that was a little fizzy. And everyone kind of looked at me askance at first, and they're like, "Ah." But then by the end, Andy and everyone else at the table was drinking the same thing I was. So just, for
Love
the
it.
record, got some gravitational pull on the girly drinks there.
Because everyone's like, those kind of do look good, but I'm
They
afraid to
do
order
look
it. So
good.
at least you had the bravery to go and
That's right. I
do
should
it.
have been on
Yes.
commission at that restaurant.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll say this super quickly, but you are right about technology changes the bare minimums of what humans are capable of doing, right? How many of us
Yeah.
can make a fire anymore, right? How many of us, a lot. And even I was talking to my good friend the other day. We went and saw some good friends from college, and he's like, my 16-year-old is now driving, and she started on a Tesla. It's all she's ever started with. So he's like, it all of a sudden it clicked to me one day. She doesn't know how to use a brake because of regenerative braking. There's a lot of things. I'm like, what? That's
Yeah.
craziness. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to go get a different car so she can learn how like normal driving works. So
Yeah.
it really is true, right? And so it does, all of this that we're talking about is really bringing up this question of like, what if we could know what's going on? You want to elaborate on this a little bit more?
Yeah, it's just the idea of like, okay, is there a way? I mean, MSPs have a lot of good visibility into their clients. Cybersecurity insurance providers want visibility into their clients to understand the risk. And so we're making these risk-based decisions off of like, kind of feels like some questionnaire you filled out 300 days ago. But I really feel, and I know you do too, is that the market is careening towards being more data-driven in this. Because right now, like you said, it's legalized gambling. And at least legalized gambling, there's a lot of data to support, your picks, or a lot of data to support whether you split these cards at the blackjack table or whatever. Right now, there's not a lot of data around cybersecurity risk. It's just, again, we did a questionnaire, feels like this.
Yeah, that's right. And so what are we seeing out of this? If there's one thing we can trust that the carriers will eventually do a good job of, they're data nerds, right? If you're going to make your business billions of dollars by legalized gambling, basically, like we said, you've got to be good at the data. You have to be. And so make no mistake, they're getting every year that goes on, they're getting better at the data, more information on what's required. And that's why when you kind of boil a lot of this down, really the genesis of what you see here, this came from Fifth Wall. So this is not like CyberFOX or Pax8 saying, ye shall do this. We're not saying this is the only things that you need. We'd never say that. But what we are saying is Fifth Wall went and did this exercise where they said, we're going to go across all the 40, 50 different carriers we work with and look at the minimums that they all require. And let's see what is the commonality between all of them. And this is a lot of what we see, right? So advanced threat protection, which is a fairly generic term. I think you guys pretty much know, some type of endpoint and firewall network monitoring that goes above the hash checking, the normal stuff, right? And then moving into multi-factor. We all know what multi-factor is. We're in this age, David, where like you just got to do it, right? Sometimes people are like, I don't want to have to plug in that code. And you have to remember, like, sorry, but it's maybe at most once every 30 days or when there's a new device. Like it's not as onerous as it used to be. And you can even say as an MSP, we own the original old school implementations of forcing a token every single time you logged in was bad. And we've made it, I need you to try it again because it's way better and way less cumbersome than you ever have thought. And it's one of the most important things that we can do. And carriers are now requiring it. They're not even going to touch you without
hey,
it.
real quick on that point, I was talking to an insurance company in California one day, and they were saying that their underwriting platform, that they go through and enter all your questionnaire stuff into their underwriting platform. And they said there's 14 dials at the bottom that need to turn green for you to be underwritable. And they said when you click MFA on all devices, all systems, all users, 12 of the 14 turn green. Right. So if you're looking at this list and you're like, according to at least one carrier, that matters 12/14ths of the way to underwritability.
Yep. Wow. That's, well said. Going through the rest of the list, EDR, one thing you should notice is that the carriers are now starting to mandate monitored EDR. So not just flipping EDR on, because they've seen plenty of incidents where someone had bought the latest, greatest EDR, but it was in detect only mode. There's no one watching over it, those kinds of things. So we're shifting that direction. Security awareness training, you all know what that is. Segregated backups. What we mean by that is those backups are not available like to where a bad guy can get access to, and ideally they're not in your business, right? You may have a local copy that's stored there, but at some point you have a separate offsite backup. So thinking through that. And then two things that are coming in, and I'll show you some examples of this in a minute, that are really becoming important are privilege access management and vulnerability management. And none of those things should shock us, right? We're going to talk more about privilege access management, which is a huge thing of that's what we do at CyberFOX. But those things are coming up because they're still looking at the data and we're saying there's more things that need to be done. There's more security minimums. There's more baseline security that's got to happen. And I just want to show you that it's working. So I wish I could, I was gonna show this to you in just little parts, but I figured I'll just show you the whole picture. I know there's a lot of data here, but I want to unpack what you're looking at. So first of all, this comes from Fitch Ratings. Fitch does all of cyber insurance. Like they look at the aggregate of the market. Every April, they'll come out with a new version and we take a look at it. So this is the newest data that we have all the way up from 2023. We, of course, don't have 2024's finished. So here's what I want you to see. Those blue bars, you see those? Those are what we call loss ratios, which is really simple metric of for every dollar that the carrier brings in, how many pennies go out the back door to losses. And I'm not talking administrative overhead and marketing and all these other things. I'm talking about
claims paid out.
Boom, just losses. And so if you want a good ratio of like if you talk to a carrier and said, what's a good loss ratio for anything like, auto insurance or workers' comp or whatever, they would tell you somewhere around 15 to 20%. That's a good, healthy loss ratio. So in other words, they have very thin room in their margins for losses. They're operating off, we got to do a good job of this, because if we get above 20%, it's really hard to do well. And so just trace with me what happened. 2015, not so good. 2016, 17, 18, all of a sudden they started to get a little bit better because they started asking the minimums. Do you have antivirus? Okay, cool. We're good. Like you have a firewall, even better. Awesome. But David, what happened in this 2019 and 2020 era that just caused this to explode in the number of incidents coming up and the cost of the loss ratios of losses spiking like this?
Oh, there was Rona, there was ransomware. Somewhere in there you've got Russian threat actors taking out their warlike grievances on all kinds of people. You've got a whole bunch of things that were never intended to be connected to an enterprise. Suddenly people are logging in on their son or daughter's computer that's filled with stuff that they got when they tried to download free video games and stuff. So yeah, there's just one or two little things that happened in that middle time frame right there.
Shocking, right? And so the carriers had no idea this was coming, because if they had known, they would not have given this many policies away to people that never should have had them, right? And even Richard over there, like remote, and Stuart, like remote work, COVID, geopolitics. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
And then once
it was a dangerous cocktail.
yeah, and you and I were at Perch at this time. And you remember when it was just blowing up, David? And it was like all the ransomware actors all of a sudden realized that MSPs are as lucrative as anyone out there, because if I can go pop one MSP, I've got access to the RMM, which is an exploit kit built out, ready to go, and they just run ransomware to all your clients, right? And so we saw an explosion, an absolute explosion. Now, what's curiously interesting, and I used to show this at talks, I give them all the time, is actually take these last two columns and I would hide them. And I would say, what do you think happened in 2022? You think it went up or down? And most people, the reasonable assumption would be like, oh, it went up, right? Well, it didn't. It actually went down. And now I want to talk about this red line. So what is that red line here? This is what's called premiums. How much does it cost to get insurance just globally? How many dollars were poured into purchasing cyber insurance? So it wouldn't shock you if 2019, 2020, 2021, we see an explosion in losses. We also see a lag time of an explosion in the cost of insurance, right? So it's always going to lag by about a year. So if you see an explosion from 2019 to 2020, no doubt that this went up. But we still see a year or two of it continuing to grow because loss ratios stayed really high. So now, in other words, the carrier is saying, you know what? I don't think it's as cheap as we used to think to be able to give away insurance. So we got to charge 4x, 8x, 10x what we used to charge. And many of you saw this happen. One of the number one questions that I saw people come up all the time, they would say, Wes, why is this getting so crazy expensive? And I'm like, it's not really getting more expensive as much as it is normalizing to what it always should have been. And that's when clients are like, oh, okay. Now, what's interesting, though, is not only have we seen the level off in the past couple of years, we've also seen a slight reduction in just the overall cost of insurance. So here's the question for us that everyone wants to know, and we won't know until April. What's going to happen in 2024? Are we going to see another year of leveling off? If we are, guess what that means? In my opinion, David, this graph right here shows something interesting. For the very first time, at least in the macro sense, we have hard evidence that proving the right numbers of controls, the security minimums that you were talking about, actually has a difference. It doesn't mean that we won't have losses. We still have losses, but we might start to normalize, which means we now know what the minimum standards should be. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And I think too, there's two ways to get to loss ratio, right? You can pay out less or you can charge more. And what insurance companies want is both of those things. They want to be able to charge more and they want to pay out less. And I do, if they can prove, if they can prove that the seatbelts and airbags diminish the amount of money they're paying out the door, don't think for a minute that there won't be a push towards some kind of like standard or regulation or something like that around that.
Yep, exactly. So this is where we're going. And I look at this, I'm like, I see this as encouraging because I get it. When decision makers say, well, David, why should I buy all this MSP security stuff you're trying to sell me when you just also told me that there's no guarantee that it's all going to work, right? Now, at least we have some data to say, like you said, seatbelts and airbags, same thing here. And the data is proving that's working. I love that. So I want to answer this question that came in. Someone, an anonymous attendee, whoever you are, Mr. Anonymous or Miss Anonymous, has cyber insurance providers, including PAM, like privileged access management or application whitelisting, is one of their requirements. So the answer is starting to become yes. So I went over to Fifth Wall and I said, hey, will you guys get for me a bunch of carriers that are asking around this whole privilege management stuff? How are you handling administrative users? Are you locking down admin accounts? Do you have a formal identity access and management process in place? Are you disabling accounts that you don't need? And wouldn't you know it, here's like 5 or 6 or 7 of them that just they gave this. So what we're seeing is the carriers are sniffing into these things. And one of the things you got to remember with the carriers, David, you kind of mentioned this, when they give out these 10-page questionnaires, there might only be 5 to 10 questions in there that they use to rate, that they use to say go, no go, right? That might be it.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of other questions they're asking. They don't tell you this, but they're data gathering questions.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, and CyberFOX can confirm this because we end up dealing with MSPs and clients all the time that are coming in saying, I have my cyber insurance carrier said, they're not just asking yes or no, they're saying you must have privilege management in place. They are now requiring it. And so it's kind of like California or New York. What one of those states do, everyone else sort of follows suit. That's what we see. The bigger carriers that are starting to say, we're needing to see some of these things in place. The rest will start to follow too, because the data shows.
Yep. And I think that the privileged access management, PAM, is such, I mean, there's a use case in the enterprise, but it is such a strong use case in the MSP space. I mean,
1000%.
such a strong use case.
So let's talk about that for a little bit, right? Because if we see that the carriers are moving this direction, let's talk about it, right? So this comes in, no Googling, all right? Everyone that's watching, I'm gonna see who can get the closest, no Googling. Okay, so Microsoft wrote this administrator account security planning guide, all right? I'm not gonna tell you, was it yesterday? Was it a month ago? Was it a year ago? I'm not gonna tell you when, but look what they said, other than I'm gonna say it's from an ancient manuscript. Look what they said. They're like, they talk about this idea of principle of least privilege, giving away the least possible. What do they say? It's so important. It's so baseline, yet people rarely follow it. It's easy. It greatly increases your security, greatly reduces your risk, and yet barely anyone follows it. First of all, David, does that shock you?
That people don't follow it, or that Microsoft recommended it?
Yes.
That people don't follow it. It actually doesn't shock me because we're humans, and I think that kind of to this point, Wes, is I mean, that's something that we saw in the MSP space when I was on that side of the house. It's like you would go into these clients and they used to have 6 employees and now they have 300. When they had 6 employees, Wes had the keys to the kingdom in the S drive, but there wasn't anything in the S drive. Now there's 300 employees and Wes still has unfettered access to the S drive where all the company goodies are now, and I think that most people don't ever sit back down and say, okay, who is Wes? What does he have access to? Should he? And should we limit or restrict that? I just don't think people go through that. And by the way, that costs zero.
Yep. Other than the time to sit down and make it
That's
happen.
it.
Exactly
Just
right.
But people don't
So
bother.
that's right. So Jeffrey has put out a guess of this was sourced and written in 1998. William Cape's roughly the same era because he's saying NT4 domain days. Anyone else want to guess a year on when you think this bad boy was published without Googling and cheating, by the way? Does anyone want to take a guess? Any others? What would you say, David? What would be your had you not seen these slides, what would be your guess?
Oh, I think that the idea around account privilege and stuff seems to be something that has become more thought about. So I would probably guess a little more recent,
Yeah.
just because it's become a lot of a hotter topic.
Yeah, I would think so too. And yet this was the era when NSYNC was the hottest band in the land. That's right. Bye, 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 baby. I mean, look at those frosted tips, man. Those are outrageous. Which, if you look at Joe Burrow, apparently it's coming back. So I don't know what to say about that.
Joe Burrow may be
Good.
wearing it, but it's not coming back.
Yes. Yes. And William, you mean every era. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So here's another one. Okay. This one's from the Microsoft Windows Security Resource Kit. This is Microsoft theory crafting. All right. And here's what they're saying. They're like, in theory, here's the problem with this whole privilege thing is if an application has access, it has more privilege than it needs, and a bad guy gets access to that application, he can do whatever that application can do. So if that application can reset user accounts, log someone off, get full access to all data on a system, any of those just as examples, well, bad guy could take advantage of that and do super nasty things. This is Microsoft just saying, we need to be careful because I could see a day that this is happening. If you look at so many incidents, this is exactly what it's going to be. And guess when this one happened? Back in the era when Microsoft themselves, ironically, had zero controls around any of this. Windows 95, back when Jay Leno and Bill were still running I guess Jay never ran the show, but that's shocking to me that even Microsoft was talking about this way before they could even configure their operating system to do this. They were talking about how big of a deal that was.
Well, and don't APIs make this even more complex?
Absolutely, they do.
I mean, because now everything used to be somewhat siloed, and now literally everything talks to everything. And in what ways, with what permissions, and who has admin creds, and did we have to make this person over here an administrator of Salesforce because they are the ones that create certain things in there or not? I mean, it gets a little tricky.
Yes, it does. And I can think of even large scale breaches that have happened because of misconfigurations and lack of attention to detail of privileges, right? I remember that Capital One breach back in 2019, 2020. I think it cost them $500 million in fines and notification damage and all that. And you know what it was? They had a firewall that was open and let a bad guy right in, and everything was ungated. It was just clear text everything. And wasn't even like a hack. It was just a bad guy doing scanning and found all this stuff. It's shocking to me that sometimes these things are like, there's just no excuse. So let's step into the modern day. Okay. So this is the latest guidance that Microsoft has from 2023, just a year ago, on implementing least privilege. And notice what they say at the end of the day, when they look at what we talked about here, they looked about people don't follow the principle of least privilege really well. What they say is we invariably find excessive numbers of accounts that have been granted way more privilege than what they need from a day to day. And so, David, this goes exact to your point, doesn't it? We've got to do a little bit of the hard work of actually not just letting the inertia of years and years and years of past inaction come to bite us in the butt, because it will. And then you have to be sitting here explaining to the client why it was that you did not help them go through that hard work, because they're going to point their finger at you once the bad thing happens, aren't they?
Yeah. Why did that person have administrative access? Because they needed to update QuickBooks. Oh, that's a great reason for your everything to come down. And, I do think that, and let's be real, it gets noisy sometimes on the support desk with giving and removing credentials and privileges and all this kind of stuff. And so what the default setting used to be is like, I get so tired of Wes hitting me about that all the time. I'm just going to give him, very high level access so that he can do what he needs to do and doesn't have to bug me on the support desk. And that's the wrong answer. No one goes back and reviews that again. It's just, it is a easy thing to solve for, but one that rarely gets looked at until it's too late.
That's right. That's right. And so at the end of the day, what you need to understand is we're dealing with an adversary who's like water. I look at this, I think this is an Alaska, it's like in the tundra, it's a beautiful image, right? But in the direction of this river is mind-boggling to me, right? Like, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but like, why didn't you just cut right through there? It would have been way easier, right? But if you know anything about water, water follows the path of least resistance. And with bad guys, we have to understand they too follow the path of least resistance. The reason that they're going after small and mid-sized companies left and right is you're way easier than a Bank of America. And I know you always talk about that example, David, right? Of like, which is easier, the small town bank or the Bank of America for a robber, right? Be the same way in the cyber world.
What's crazy was if you look to the left of your cursor, you could see where the water did used to make another U right there, then cut straight across.
Yeah.
So to your point, it did carve out a section to make it easier. And I don't know if you've ever, like, when your kids are little and you go to the beach and you watch them try to build something to, out of sand to keep the water back. And it's like, that ain't going to work. And you go out the next day and it's totally gone. And man, water is like impossible to keep back. That will find a way. And the threat actors are the same exact way.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. Andy Larringe's comments said most high level admins scare me the most. MSP admins is right because they have the power, right? They have the access, they have the credentials to do really scary things. And so Microsoft talks about this in that 2023 guide. They talk about two things that need to be solved for, not like perfectly solved for, but they need to be addressed. The first they call is a width problem. And what they say is they say invariably, we find over and over and over organizations have granted way too many controls and way too many privileges to certain groups of users. And so to steal from Andy, it's help desk is your biggest culprit of this. I want you to finish this webinar and go back and think, what level of access does our help desk really have? What are all the things that they can do? Because you're going to find they can probably do things they need to do, like logging into machines, especially with some kind of local admin access every time they log in, the ability to reset passwords, the ability to run scripts, all these things that are normal for day-to-day use. And now we've taken this huge class of 5, 10, 15, 50 different users that have all of this really wide access. It's far more than they need, and that's a huge problem. And so part of privilege management is understanding what do they need and how do we give it to them when they need it and then revoke it when they don't need it. And that can't be a manual human process because you're going to fail. That kind of like rote process is never going to be consistent.
Yep. And there's that piece too of like, for audit purposes, everybody can't be using admin, is that you really need to know who touched it, when did they touch it, why, and all that kind of stuff. And to be quick and expedient, lots of times we trample on good hygiene in that regard.
Yeah, you nailed it. So what's the second part is the depth problem. So the other thing Microsoft says is we have a problem of depth. We have too many single one-off users that have access to way more than they've ever needed. Maybe they needed it back in the old day, but in today's day and age, they don't need the same level of access that they do today. And my favorite example of that is when I was at the bank, I worked at a bank, I ran security for a bank, and I had a CFO who just required everything to be on his laptop because he's like, I bring my laptop home to work and our VPN is flaky, and it was flaky. And he's like, I just find if I have all my Excel spreadsheets, and you'd be shocked at billion-dollar banks running everything off of Excel, but it's true. He's like, I need it all on my machine. So I need access to everything. You talk about a difficult problem. The number one thing I'm thinking about is even with disk encryption, like that's a scary position to be in for the amount of data that he has just on his laptop everywhere he goes.
Yep. Have you seen that meme where it's basically like it's all Excel? If people only knew the entire world ran on Excel, and but that doesn't mean you need all the bank's goodies on your personal laptop.
Yep. It also reminds me of that XKCD where people are like, oh, I got encryption, so I'm good. And it's like on the left, like how we think bad guys are like, oh, if I use quantum computing and all this stuff to crack the password, and then reality, it's like I just have a bat, and I'm like, give me your passcode. Otherwise, I'm gonna beat you over the head with it. We happily give it up, right? So
Yes.
exactly right. I'm gonna pull another quote from Andy over here. He says, and then the MSP owners become the bottleneck, having to create certain users with certain privileges, as you can't always grant fully across the board that to others within your org. It keeps me up at night. Yeah. So what we've done in essence is we've sort of turned ourselves and our clients into a wolf in sheep's clothing. And what I mean by that is we've gotten into this situation where because they have access to so many things, and because we haven't really controlled that, they then become the target. It doesn't require some scary, nasty 0-day that no one's ever heard of. It's the normal stuff. And what the carriers are looking at over and over and over is they're saying the data shows it's the normal stuff. And that's what we care about. That's what we want to address. And that's what we have to deal with. So how do we get rid of the wolf in sheep's clothing? We don't fire our people. We remove the teeth from that wolf to where they can't do all the scary things that they can do. And the only way to do that is to have a deep look at privileges.
Yep.
So let's kind of move on. We're getting close to being done here, and I'd love to hear additional questions or other things that you may have. Actually, I think that photo wasn't from Copilot. I don't believe. I have to go look and find where I got that from. That's a good question, Anthony. I'm not sure. So what does Microsoft say about all this and all that guidance? We know we have admin. These are not attackers. These are admins. We know we have admins everywhere, right? This idea of how do we, and it's not just local admin. It's not just domain admin. It's admins on line of business applications, right? It's admins in cloud systems. It's what we're talking about is privileges where people have more than they need, or they have what they need to do their job, but they only need it for a period of time. Another good example of this might be SolidWorks. You have this line of business application that's critical to making money for an engineering firm. The only time they need local admin is when you have to update SolidWorks. And if I can't update SolidWorks, I can't operate. So chicken and egg, catch 22. Which do I do? Give them full access and have a ton of risk so they can update, or not have it. And now they're going to get really angry with me every time they have to update. And sure enough, they wanted to work at 8 p.m. when the update rolled out. And now they're really angry.
Yeah.
So
And
this is the problem we solve.
For whatever reason, and I know you know this to be true, like when you pull people's admin access, they freak out. I mean, for whatever reason, people want to think that they have access to all the things, and you're like, no, but I want to recognize that, look, I get it. When you go and tell these people you used to be a power user and now we're making you a standard user, there is a certain amount, whether they actually use the power user stuff or not, it feels like you're moving them down a caste, in the system or something like that.
Yep.
And there is a visceral reaction lots of times to that.
Yep. Yeah. 1,000% agree. 1,000%. So here's why we struggle with this. And this happens over and over and over. We decide, like David said, I'm going to remove local admin. I'm going to start doing a great job at dealing with privileges and start pulling this away. Just like we said, the end user gets frustrated because things don't work the way they want things to work. And so what do? They go and complain, say, this doesn't work. And now I can't get my job done. And now you're costing me money. And then what do? We say, oh, whoops, sorry, I'll just give the access back. And usually we blame something like probably DNS was down or something. It's a blip and we're good again, right? And security suffers. And at the end of the day, David, what our security looks like over and over and over is a lot like this than real security, right? And the more you look at this, the better and better and better it gets, because we have this little guard gate that goes down.
Yes.
What do people do? This is probably not even robbers trying to break into the business. They're just this is probably your own employees like, the gate's down again, just driving through the grass.
100%.
And that's security for us, and we don't do the right things.
Yes. And I mean, this to me is one of those things sometimes about like policy with no execution. I always tell this story where we had this client one time that had a policy of you had to have a badge to access the building once you were inside the building. And we walked in the building and they had a bowl of badges up front. And you just grabbed a badge out and badge your way all through. Then when you left, you like threw it back in the bowl. And I'm like, okay, I'm sure you have a policy that says access is restricted, but it was this, right? It's like that's not what we were actually angling for.
Full of badges.
Take a badge, Wes, and just use it all day.
That's a first for me. Yep. So here's the thing. Microsoft is like, okay, we got to address this. And so I come from a very hard security background, right? And I'm used to the world of like Linux, where they use what's called mandatory access control and all this stuff called SE Linux, where I can like hard code privileges. Well, Windows is like, we're probably not going to do that because we don't have nerds that use Windows like Wes. So we probably need an easier approach. And so what do? They said, we got it. We're going to come out with this thing called UAC. And you know what's going to be so awesome about it is we're going to separate the privileges of the user. And before that they can do something they need to do, we're going to have UAC pop up and say, are you sure you want to do that? And then I'm sure Microsoft is like, you know what's going to happen, David? Every user is going to pause, and they're going to research, and they're going to email their admins, and they're going to look. And the reality is, it's Pavlov up in here, right? The second I see that little yellow thing, yes, I immediately say yes every single time. And I'm guilty of that. I do it. I'm like, sometimes I hit yes past them. I'm like, wait a second, whoops, what did I just do? Too late now, baby. You've now granted that token access to do the nasty, right?
That's right. Well, it's like whenever it goes around on social media where people put those statements where the people can't use it because of some law, you can't use my content. And I'm always like, you remember that thing you scrolled through, the terms of use, when you got your app, you just scrolled all the way to the bottom and click accept. It said that they can do whatever they want,
Yep.
And this stuff right here is no one's inspecting it. I love that it says malware.exe, but a lot of people just say, oh yeah, whatever. But yes.
Yep. So how do we as MSPs handle this? Well, and this is where CyberFOX, like this, I want to talk specifically about kind of how we help address this, right? In a CyberFOX-less world, you have a couple ways to do it. You get Oprah up in here and everyone gets admin, right? And by the way, for everyone listening today, if you look under your seat, you have admin. It's sitting there ready for you, right? Like that's how it is. Or we go a little bit better and we're like, no, we're going to have one shared admin, but everyone knows the password, because changing that password is a nightmare. God forbid we use a password manager, but maybe we use a password. But either way, that's the only way we handle it. And either way, this is not good. Either way, we end up in a situation where it does not work well for us. And so this is where we have to think about solving this. And I want to talk about how you start solving this problem. It's actually way easier than you think. First of all, we have to centralize access. We cannot secure what we cannot centralize. If I can't see something, I can't secure something. And so what CyberFOX does in a very simple way, we're going to give you the ability to deploy. It's a very lightweight agent. And I mean lightweight, like 2 megs. It's like tiny lightweight. You're going to deploy that agent. We're going to go into an audit mode. And what that audit mode does is we're starting to look at everything. We're starting to look and say, what do you need? Why is this taking this admin credentials to do this? What kind of application is, and why did it happen? And what user requested? So you're going to get, we don't make any changes. We're just looking, giving you the audit. And then this gives you the ability to walk in and say, cool, anything by SolidWorks signed by them is good to go. Or you might say, well, actually SolidWorks had a huge breach a year ago, and one of their like pieces of code was nasty and bad. So I could say only the past year of SolidWorks, or I could get all the way down to like hash levels. I could do all kinds of like, allow listing types of things, get very, very in depth. And then once I build that audit, and the great thing about this is this usually takes about 2 to 4 hours for a small business. For a larger business, it might take a few more hours, but we're not talking days and weeks and months like some platforms take. It's very simple. Then once we're ready to go into enforcement, we operate way, way, way down at the kernel level, and we're really good at stopping all the bad ish. And we would say, this is not allowed. It's not going, we have not given privileges for this. And what's really cool is when we have policy that says that's allowed, what we do is we interrupt UAC, we take a look at policy, and we say, yep, policy allows it. We grant the token, it lets it do what it needs, and we immediately revoke it. So it's a very flexible, powerful, it's transparent to the user. And then what we get asked all the time is, well, Wes, what happens when you have something there's no policy for? Like, no big deal. What we'll do is we'll pop up to the user. Hold on, we're taking a look at this. We'll notify you and go into the PSA. It can go into an email. It can go to your Apple Watch. I mean, you can go to anywhere you want, and you can one time allow it and say, this is good one time, or permanently say, oh, I forgot about that one. It's always okay. Or I can deny it. And then the other cool thing that we do is we don't pull your technicians away. And what I mean by that is we have a technician mode where they have a little QR code on an app that we give them, and they can scan that. And what it gives them is while they're logged into a machine to troubleshoot, it gives them full access at local admin level. The instant they log out, we rip it all away. And so that admin mode is extremely powerful. Going back to what David was talking about of, keys to the kingdom, I feel like I got ripped away. That doesn't happen, right? Because we're giving them the access when they need it. They can authenticate themselves. Otherwise, it's gone. And so, David, I want you to kind of wrap up for us on this analogy of, why this level of access is so important with like multiple rooms and how this, I know you've shared this over and over, and I love that analogy.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. And so like if we were gonna, by the way, I love these types of developments. Have you ever heard of like 5+1s? Like once you hear about a 5+1 where it's like commercial on the bottom and then 5 stories of residential on top.
Okay, yeah.
And they always have a name of like the Theodore or the Bray. It's always the something. And now that you hear about a 5+1, everywhere you go, every city you go to, you're like, oh, there's a 5+1. This is not a 5+1. But anyway, if you and I were going to break into these apartments and we were going to break into apartment by apartment, there's a lot of risk, a lot of noise, a lot of opportunity for us to get caught, a lot of opportunity for somebody to be coming down the hall. And it's very onerous and hard to do that, to break into each one of these apartments. Or we could break into the superintendent's office, take the master keys, and then just walk through and unlock each one of these. What MSPs need to realize is they're the superintendent with the master key, and every apartment is a separate downstream customer. And the bad guys have figured this out. And the bad guys have figured out, like, I don't want to go try to breach all these individual customers when I can go in and utilize their RMM tool to push malicious software out that looks legitimate, from one spot. And we've seen that happen, unfortunately. That's why you see sometimes these insurance rates for MSPs are creeping up, because they have the aggregate risk of their customers. But yeah, that's the way to think about it, is when you are taking care of your customers downstream from you, you are the superintendent of a very large apartment building, and you've got the master keys to all of them. So the bad guys want those master keys because that's a lot easier than breaking into each apartment.
And I love that analogy because it rings with clients. So they're like, okay, cool. I get it. That makes total sense, right? So a few questions that came in, Danielle, I'm going to answer those, and feel free to add in, Danielle, if you want to add into anything as well. So one question is a really good one. Would cyber insurance providers gauge or measure the organization's implementation of PAM and the least privilege for internal users? What they mean by that is like, are the carriers smart enough to say, well, it's not just that you're using CyberFOX to solve for privilege management, but you also have it correctly implemented and fully implemented? The answer is not yet, but that is where the carriers are going. Just like I can put the little beacon in the windshield of my car, and like David was saying, I might drive like a bat out of hell normally, but for my driver's test, I was good. Same thing. They want to get to configuration knowledge and know that you have it fully built out and correctly implemented. That day is coming. Companies like CyberFOX, we've got the maturity already to give them that. We're just waiting for them to grow into that to where they can. And of course, we wouldn't do it without you you'd be the one that does it, not us. But that is the future. So I love that question. It's coming. Another question: how does Auto Elevate compare to Threat Locker? The big difference, the way I love to explain it, and we can have some engineers talk more about this too, but the way I love to explain it is you can get to full implementation in a couple hours. Threat Locker is months to never. And that's a huge challenge, right? Threat Locker's coverage is awesome, and it's a great tool, and it's a great company. But we hear from so many folks that are like, I've tried it, and the amount of work, and trust me, as a business owner myself, I can tell you, it's not just about the tool cost, it's about the overhead that comes with it. And at some point, when you dedicate 2 to 3 full-time FTEs just to a tool, you start to scratch your head and say, is that juice worth the squeeze? And that's something we owe to the business to make sure that we're really thinking hard about. And the last question is, would implementing PAM handle the shadow IT stuff, such as admin accounts on users' workstation with an unchanged password? So we're going to help with shadow IT, but understand shadow IT is and maybe that's a webinar for a future day, but that's a lot of things you got to handle, because you got to have access, like what levels of SaaS do they have access to? What user accounts are they using to log into a lot of that? So at CyberFOX, with our auditing, we can show you some of those things, especially at the machine level. But shadow IT is really handled by several kind of tools that you're really working with together in unison, and it is a big problem that needs to be solved for sure. So that's a great question. We're not directly a shadow IT company, but we can certainly add in as a source of truth into that. David, any final thoughts for us? One of the things we wanted to make sure we had up for folks is this right here. We have a free ebook if anyone would like it, this Living Off the Land Attacks. There's a QR. You can go grab that. Would love to have anyone go take a peek at that. It's a really, really great ebook. But David, any other closing comments, thoughts?
No, as I would just say that I think that, you know, my experience with MSPs, no one does this great, right? And so having some tooling to help you out on that is super important, is that there's a lot of shared credentials, there's a lot of copying and pasting, that kind of stuff. And I think that having a tool like CyberFOX really helps the internal discipline on that, which then pays benefits downstream to the security of your end user customers.
Love that. Love that. Great. Well, thank you all for joining. If we can help in any way, make sure you reach out to us at CyberFOX and Pax8. Danielle, we'll let you finish up and take us away.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for presenting and joining us. I just put a chat in the message there. It said feel free to reach out through cyberfox.com, as well as if you are Pax8 partner, feel free to go through your rep as well to learn more, and see even more, you know, questions about or any more answers about some of the different questions that people were asking, or just to learn more information. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. We'll be doing some more of these webinars coming up. So be sure to, you know, check us out on LinkedIn as well as we share more. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks,
And
Danielle.
also it will be recorded and added to our CyberFOX YouTube channel. So if you want to
Mine does that thing where it'll do the hearts, Wes. Does yours do that? Are you a Mac or whatever?
No, well, I am Mac, but this is a Windows machine.
I mean, like, it really, I'll be honest, like when you do it and you're not aware that you're doing it, it's very like annoying.
There it is. Yeah. And with that, we will leave you guys.
I kind of like this one. It looks like I'm coming on stage for a rock concert. But anyway, there you go. Thanks, Danielle and Wes. Always
Thanks,
a pleasure,
everyone.
my friend. Good seeing you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be good.
Bye.